Hey folks, this is Click 3D. This is the program where we talk about all things 3D, like hardware and software. We do interviews and a number of different tutorials and things like that. Now today we are going to be doing another interview, and my guest is Brett Chilton, and he's the Chief Commercial Officer and a co-founder of a company called Skand. It's Skand, and Skand is a software platform that brings together all kinds of 3D data sets, and it allows users not just to visualize the data, but they have some interesting machine learning and artificial intelligence technology that helps give users some insight into different types of analysis and maybe what's going on with their data. Now, of course, you can always share this with different people on the cloud, and I think you'll find it's quite a polished product. And this is another example where people are doing some really cool work outside of my area, which is in forensics, but we can learn a lot from, the kind of work that they're doing and the application of machine learning. Sometimes, even if it's in a completely different area, it's very relevant to the work that you're doing too. So Brett's going to give us some background on the company and the kinds of things that they're working on. And he also does a little demo, and he brings up some data on the screen using their platform. So hopefully you'll enjoy this one. Thanks. All right. Hey, Brett. Hey, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. And looking forward to asking you some questions.
Amazing. Coming to you from Melbourne, Australia.
Yeah, far away on the other side of the world. It's my Friday. It's your Saturday. And very early, so I appreciate you getting up so early in the morning to talk to me. But I guess it was the most convenient time at this point.
Correct.
All right. Hey, let me start by asking you a little bit about your background. So I'd like to know. I mean, you're obviously you're the chief commercial officer at Skand, and there's been obviously some history there. So can you walk me through how you got started and what has led you up to this position right now?
Sure. So 2010, we got into the UAV space. So data acquisition coming from survey side, DJI, flying drones, services, and sorts of things. 2014, we started to realize that space is being commoditized. A lot of people coming in. The tech was accelerating fast, and the charge out rates were dropping. So we started to look at what we could do to where the data was going and where the value was actually being created after the data was acquired. At that particular time, we had a customer here in Australia that had a problem where they needed to access many millions of meters of roofing and building envelope. So we made the jump from services to software. In that process, we came across someone that said, "Hey, you're doing all this analysis for reporting. You should be using machine learning, computer vision to do that." And so we kicked that off in 2016. And then this sort of all came to a head in 2018 when we formed Skand, and that's the platform that's where we're going to quickly run through today. And now we sit very much. We don't fly drones. We're very much on the data ingestion side of things, so data management, visualization, and then delivery to various stakeholders.
Okay, yeah, you went from 2018 to today, which means you skipped over the entire pandemic.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother interview. So the pandemic was rough. Of course, getting data in the field became difficult. So on the asset management side, a lot of our customers are institutions like universities. They went into, they went into lockdown, and, they just cotton balled everything, and they weren't really worried about, how they were maintaining buildings and whatnot. It was just a survival because the revenue stream was gone, and, no one was using the building. So pandemic was definitely difficult for us. Internally, we took this opportunity to actually take the platform from doing inspection focused things on buildings to looking at the wider challenge in the market, which was really around spatial data. So what does that mean? That's going from just supporting reality meshes to, okay, now we need to look at point clouds, and we need to look at the IFCs and other file formats that we know are out there that are required. So panoramic photos, these sorts of things. And at the time, we were on a platform called Cesium, which is where a lot of people start off in displaying data. So we had to rebuild our rendering engine from the ground up. And so we used the pandemic to refocus our engineering team to do that. And it was tough, but we've come out the other side, and now we've got that capability of supporting multiple different file formats, which I think was the correct move. It's definitely where the market is going. People don't just want to look at a single data set in isolation. They wanted to be able to compare it to other things. So yeah, that's what we've been doing during the pandemic.
Okay. Another question. So the customers that you currently have, are they, this is a 2-in-1 question. So are the customers typically people that are doing service? Are they the end customer that wants to see their data? What's the makeup of sort of the kind of people that are, want to see their stuff in with your product? And also, I'm curious about the makeup of the data. Are you finding that the majority of the data you're getting is from drone data? Is it terrestrial scanning? Is it what's sort of the makeup there, or what do you think is happening there?
Yeah, so I'll come to the second part of the question first. We aim to be hardware agnostic. So really, these days, the maturity of the technology and the maturity of the market to use the technology to gather the data has really accelerated. So people are a lot more savvy now. They're using drones, they're using iPhones, they're using terrestrial LiDAR scanners, they're using panoramic cameras, and they're combining all of these things to really represent the built environment. So we need to make sure that there's no barriers on our side to what we're accepting. So we're not, we're not just looking at drone data in isolation. We understand that, and if you look at an example of that, we do a lot of work with local councils around the world, and some councils use helicopter data to do mapping of their assets out in the field. But if you have assets underneath trees, those assets aren't going to show up right in the data set. So how are you capturing that at a ground level? So we're agnostic to the hardware side of things. As for users that typically use us, this comes to the core of what Skand is really about, and that is that we've been saying now for 10 years that the way that the written world has been sort of dominating in reports and stuff for as long as we can all remember, we believe spatial data is going to play an increasing role in how things are expressed out in reality. And people like to see things. Context is much better understood when you can actually visualize and see things out in the field. So our whole mission for the last 10 years has been, it was like 10 years ago, it was 100% education. And then it was 95% education, 5% commercial. And now we're at a point where people get it. And we're more and more, we're handing off the ability to view the data and then letting them find the use cases. So we're really big in the infrastructure space, digital engineering, surveying. And the thing that we're helping with those guys, digital engineers and surveyors, is that they don't actually know what happens with the data once they hand it off to their clients. So being able to help them get it in the hands of more and more people, they're telling us what they're then using that data for. And it's all sorts of really cool ideas that we didn't build Skand for because we're not the end user.
Yeah, well, doing something with the documentation part is the fun part, and it's great you get it, but then it's what the hell do you do with the damn thing once you got it? And sometimes the customer doesn't know what to do with the data when they pay for it, they get it. I got this massive point cloud data set, but I have no clue what to do with it. So I noticed that, I mean, you mentioned before that when you were doing services, you would do the documentation and you do like some kind of analysis. And in the Skand viewer, you also have, like, if I bring it up here, you've got both. If you go to the product, you've got a viewer and you've got Skand analysis. So can you tell me what each one of those products is?
Yeah, so the viewer is, as it states, we're able to visualize spatial data. So that's, point clouds, orthomosaics, reality meshes, IFCs, a bunch of other file formats. And on the analysis side is really where we're taking imagery and feeding it through a computer vision algorithm to then spit out things that we've found, project that back down onto the model. The direction that the business is really taking now, that's been great for building envelope, but we've had so much demand in the market for things that are not, don't fit into that bucket of building envelope. We're now looking at supporting, machine learning as a service. So how do we bring the customers' requirements into Skand and let them label images, train a library, and then show that data in Skand? So that's really a push of the business as well, and that is sort of a maturity of the product where we're seeing that we can't be everything to everyone. And there's all sorts of different use cases and all sorts of different types of data that people want to train machine learning on. So that's more on the analysis side, is sort of bringing what we've done for the last 10 years in a user-friendly way to the front end of Skand and making that accessible to the customer.
Oh, okay, cool. I was wondering if you could maybe just show me a little bit about like what it looks like, the viewer and stuff like that. Could I share the screen here? Yeah, maybe just give me a quick look here and see what how this is all laid out.
Yeah, no worries. So, as I mentioned before, one of the challenges of what the space that we're in is being able to see different types of data set in a viewer in the one place. So I'm just going to show you a real quick example of, this is an example of a point cloud being interacting with a design file. So in this instance, it's a great New Zealand company. They need to do some design around a water tank here, and they needed a really lightweight way that they could come in and show what that looked like in the viewer. We're bringing two different file types here into the viewer, and then displaying that side by side, so they can move that around, they can make adjustments to the design, and then that helps them to share to different stakeholders, whether it be procurement, other design at the client end, and compliance and whatnot. So another example is probably if we look at the machine learning side of things. So you can see here that we have a typical sort of scene with a reality mesh, and then sorry, it's just loading, and then you can see these polygons that are down here on the roof, and this is representing things that the machine learning has found and has projected down onto the model. And then we have different categorizations of what that defect is, and this information will then push to reporting, and then ends up becoming scope of works for the maintenance teams to then go up and do this. Do different maintenance on the building to actually see what is going on, and it tends to be things that are sort of high risk and facades, hard to reach areas, roofs, asbestos roofs, these sorts of things. So and we've got a bunch of annotation tools and other things that sit over the top as well. Correct. Yeah, so there's about 15 categories that we've trained out for, and the one of the misconceptions in the field is that it's all done by machine. It's not. The actual prioritization of what we are doing is done by people. We've got a trained team here in Melbourne. So it's exactly what we just said. Things like corrosion. We've been training a library for corrosion for almost 8 years now. So it's well understood, and so we feed the photos into the platform, and it spits out a bunch of bounding boxes. And then have people that go through and then correct that, false positive, false negative, feed that back in, and give it priority based on where it is, the severity of it, and what it looks like, and then that comes through into the platform as sort of like a defect category listing, so you can see them here, and then. We will then take that information and it gets pushed into It gets pushed into Skand, and then from there, the customer can make a PDF report. They can make an Excel spreadsheet that gets exported and goes into things like Power BI, and it formulates across a portfolio of buildings. That Power BI document will then help them to formulate where they're going to spend money, in what areas, how they're going to generate their scope of work documents and whatnot.
Yeah, I think that's super cool. I know that in the forensics world that I work, I always thought it'd be really interesting to be able to, for example, detect things like evidence markers or a knife or a gun or cartridge cases and things like that. But it's interesting. So you start with the photos, and then from the photos you go, and then you start putting it into translate it over into the point cloud data. Exactly.
So yeah, we're mapping the. If I just get rid of this. We're mapping down onto the scene. You can see here that we have the cameras that are mapped back down into the model. So if we click on those, it will take you through, and you can see that we've got the source photo that will eventually load over here on the right. And then that can be pulled down to in its highest resolution, whilst we still have the actual positioning of the camera over here. So we can actually just click on the model, and it will show you the photos that are seeing that point in the scene. And then, you can then click on that, and it will take you to it and load that source photo. But yeah, to your point around the casings and guns and knives and whatever, this is the capability that we're working on now. So you would be able to load instances of photos like that into Skand, and you draw on those boxes and start to train that algorithm for your account yourself. Mm-hmm. When we did some looking into it, there are some businesses out there that are doing this, but it's very behind the scenes. You don't actually get to see what's going on. So we want to sort of bring that to the front end for users. So there's all sorts of things. I was at a conference in our capital city just this week, and we're speaking to some agriculture guys, and they're like, at the moment we have people that are looking for certain types of plants on riverbanks. To be really neat to have a way that we could sort of identify those without having to go through lots and lots of photos. Other guys that are doing something like that, but they're using other platforms to do the identification and not the visualization, so they're sort of disjointed. So our job is to sort of bridge that gap and bring it into the front end for the user.
So does the client or the customer, like the end user, let's say, do they have access to all this data, or is this sort of like, is there like an intermediate tool, like somebody does the analysis or whatever, and then they just provide certain pieces of it to the end customer? Like how or does the customer, or can you make everything available to the end customer?
Everything's available to the end customer. Correct.
Yeah, it's super cool. It looks really, really interesting. And so, like some of the measurement tools and things like that, like people, I guess some of the basics, just distances, area measurements. Is there anything related to volume?
So we don't do volumetrics. We're looking at that now, but it's not a difficult thing for us. But yeah, you can see we have your typical polygons, polylines, these sorts of things that describe them as objects of interest or defects, depending on what they are. All of our data is survey driven. So you can see here we have easting, northing elevation, which has been a big push on survey side. You can also see down the bottom that we have, lat long, and we're able to do, pick up different spatial reference systems for around the world as well, which has been a big key driver for the businesses, because we understand that in the digital engineering survey world, this is the world that they live in. So all of the annotations and things that we're building now are out in survey space as well.
So customers who are signed up to this thing, how does it work? Like, is there like a yearly fee? Is it based on because sometimes you can have like massive data sets. So is it based on like how much data they push through the system, or is there just like a different way that you can set them up?
Yeah. So I mentioned before that we're really all about bringing spatial data to the masses, and then allowing them to integrate or to thread that into their workflows. We are unlike most businesses that charge for storage. We have a storage fee, but we make no money on it because we want to encourage people to put data into the platform. We don't want people pulling various data sets off Skand so they can fit other ones in because they're worried about going up into another category of storage. So on the storage side of things, we charge very little. It's pretty much our storage cost plus a small handling fee. But yes, you're right. We're subscription based. We're software as a service. So there's a monthly fee, and there's or an annual fee, which is slightly discounted. But we're super competitive. We're really pushing to get eyeballs onto the platform. There is professional services fees that we do charge out as well if you need certain types of analysis on top of what we provide. But at its core, we're a software as a service business. So yeah, subscriptions.
Okay. Let me ask you, what is next for Skand? So, you mentioned AI and machine learning. Are you continuing to do work in that space? Are there other things that you're going to be implementing in the future? What kinds of things can people expect that you can talk about?
Yeah, there's a big push for us in data management. We're doing a great job in that space, but we could do a lot better. And when I say data management, which is a pretty broad umbrella, but we want to work really hard on how that data is stored and how that data is shared, and the different applications that are existing out in the world. How does it integrate with? So, having the ability to take a large data set and put it into cold storage for 12 months because you don't need to access it for a period of time. These are the sorts of things that really interest us. Doing integrations with existing systems that are out there in the marketplace is obviously key. We're seeing a lot of customers come to us that have really well established GIS platforms and dashboards and the like. So bringing those and sort of bolting them together in a way that's seamless for the customer is really important. So I think that's it's pretty much understood in the market that in the next 5 years we're seeing all of the building blocks come together, but who's going to wrap them up and make it really plug and play? And that's really where we're aiming to be. We're aiming to be one of those players that's not just talking about doing that, but actually doing it.
Excellent. Well, I'm just going to put this back up here for people who are interested. There's obviously, if somebody wants to reach out to you or to the company, there's a contact page on skand.io. Let me put that back up here as well, so they can always, of course, reach out to you. Look, thanks so much for your time. I realize it's early there, but I mean, the Skand, the product itself looks super polished, looks really cool. And I always like learning from other industries and areas. And there's a lot of commonality. What people need in the architecture and engineering and construction market is often what people need in the forensics market. They need measurements, they need data, they need information, and being able to tie all that stuff together. You're talking about imagery and photogrammetry, laser scanning, panoramic images. That's exactly what, where all this is going. It's this fusion of all these different types of data sources. So yeah, awesome. I think it's great. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's catch up soon, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks for the time.